but the picture behind you, people would easily be mistaken to think that's Finland.
And he said, oh, they would have done that where they would have put pegs in to have scaffolding to work up. It's a locally built stove that's probably from the 1930s.
Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta. Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta.
Welcome to another edition of the Upper Bench Sauna Podcast. We are back in action after a little bit of a hiatus of recording these episodes, but we're super excited to be bringing you an episode here this evening. But Aero, what do you got cooking here?
Well, I'm seriously jet lagged here. I came back from Finland. I was, among other things, I was attending the World Sauna Forum. So there's been a lot of Finland and a lot of sauna. And I will actually, I came back from Finland because I'm headed to Michigan for midsummer. So I'm going to do one of my sauna talks there. But life is good. I'm tired, but I'm back in New York and it's not super hot here. Perfect sauna weather. Risto, what about you? What's going on?
I'm just jealous. I'm jealous of what you're doing in Michigan. You're going to Fin Camp, and I've been there before, but are you going to get to sauna?
I bet I will. Yeah, no, I won't go if I don't.
Okay. Well, that's one thing I've never done there, so I am jealous. And it's been good. We've had a lot of family in town. They were in town for a funeral. My grandpa passed, but he lived a long, good life. So, it's mostly just happy, good memories for everyone. And I actually introduced a family member to sauna yesterday. So it's been a good time.
Excellent. And Risto, who do we have here over with us tonight?
Well, we have Michael Nordskog joining us, and he, from the very beginning of our podcast, he's someone that I've wanted to speak with and interview. Shortly after I got into sauna, I started looking into what kind of sauna literature is out there. What kind of books could I get? I enjoy books, as you can see. And I came across this book right here, The Opposite of Cold. This is his baby, and it's one of my, if I could only have two sauna books, this is one of them. This one and Bernard Hilala's The Sauna Is. Bernard's book is small. It kind of gives you the basics. And then this book really gets into the heart and soul with some amazing photography and historical research. So I have multiple copies of this, and we give it out to friends. And if you go to a sauna enthusiast home, you're likely to find this book on the shelf. So welcome to the show.
Wow, thanks, Risto. I really appreciate that. We've corresponded for years, and you were an early enthusiast, a voice in favor of the book. And I mean, there's just nothing like getting feedback like that for me. The book's 15 years since it was published now, and it's still sells regularly. It's in its second printing. And I've, kind of gotten this whole sort of side gig out of it over the last few years and been able to do a lot of fun things with it. But from the start, I really intended it as a good way for people to get a hold of the aesthetics behind sauna, particularly in Upper Midwest in the United States, and also tell this immigrant history, because I grew up in northern Minnesota and had traveled around a lot. And, and you often hear that in the U.S. there's not a authentic sauna. But of course, as you guys all know, there's plenty of authentic sauna here, generations deep. And so it was a real honor for me to be able to tell that story and hook up with University of Minnesota Press, which they did a great job with this book as well. And of course, Aaron Hautala, the photographer. So really great to be here, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me here, and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. I mean, I'm a collector of trinkets and such. I'm not the biggest reader like Risto, but I can honestly say, Michael, your book is one of the few that I've cracked. And I gotta say, yeah, big fan. Been looking forward to this myself. Aero, I'm sure you've got a copy or have read this sucker too.
I was just gonna say, let's face it, I don't have a sauna. And I don't have that book, but I did spend one night. So my speaking assignment. So I'm traveling the country, the U.S. right now, and giving lectures on saunas. provided by Finlandia Foundation National. So I was in Hancock, Michigan, and there were several copies of that book. So I have not read it cover to cover, but I did spend one night in Hancock, Michigan, reading your book. So I'm not totally screwed here. So I know what we are talking about here.
Good. I was counting on you, Arrow, having some perspective on this, and was looking forward to the conversation. In fact, I just re-listened to this afternoon a little bit of your interview with Mikkel Aaland from Sauna Week last winter, and I originally listened to that live streaming in my car. I was driving around in Northeast Iowa, and it was a little spotty, but I got to do it this time with the visuals. But when we wrote when we put this book together, it was really fun to work with Aaron. He's a gifted photographer, and he's a legitimate Finn. I'm only a tiny partial Finn, so it was good to have Aaron on board. And he brought a lot of human element into it and everything. But I always thought of the book as there would be a lot of good quality text there, but people are mostly going to look at the photographs and kind of browse through it. And of course, there's a few little, there's sort of small compartments of text here and there that you can read, and you don't have to read it all at once. But I'm so pleased that it's kind of really become an obligatory, Christmas gift for Finnish American families. And I see it get more and more feedback from European readers now too, which is really gratifying.
Very cool. Is it in any other languages for print?
It's not just in English.
Yeah, we got to get a Japanese version one of these days. I say Japanese because the Japanese are enthusiastic sauna tourists, and I'm not sure how often they make it to North America. You're right, there is a misconception that we don't have really good saunas and a robust sauna culture in North America. Even I think sauna enthusiasts a lot of times miss that. But the picture behind you, people would easily be mistaken to think that's Finland.
Yeah, it's the same sauna from the cover photo, and lucky me, that is the sauna that's on the lake at our family cabin up in northeastern Minnesota. So I just used that one last weekend again. But it's a 100-year-old plus dovetailed northern white cedar log sauna with the standard 2 rooms, and very traditional building that we kind of updated and rehabbed back in the 1990s, and that's what really really sparked my interest in older sauna and finding out more about it. So I mean, being from that part of Minnesota, sauna it's just there. People have them all over the place and at their cabins, and you certainly, whether you're Finnish or not, you get some exposure to it. But I certainly wanted to learn more about it, and found some great resources, especially notably Mikkel's book Sweat from the 1970s, which the really important part of that for me was he spent a lot of time in Minnesota doing his research and really validated the upper Midwest as a world sweat bathing location with, I think, kind of a distinct, it's a distinct culture really in its own way.
It's funny that you would say that. It's sort of like, I heard it so loudly, you said that the sauna that is behind you is the standard 2-room sauna. Well, maybe it's for you, but it's not a standard sauna in the U.S. because standard sauna in the U.S. is only the hot room. So there's kind of a difference there right away, which tells that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and this is a great building to have in the winter. This is up in Brimston, where there have been some bad fires up there this summer already in northeastern Minnesota, and fortunately they went the other way. And I know of a couple of authentic saunas. I've heard rumors of saunas that were destroyed in those fires, but anyway, if that had blown the other direction, we would have been right in the path of it. But it's a very cold part of Minnesota, and having that ante room there is so nice. And with it being these 6-inch thick logs, you can have a good hot fire and come back in the morning into that building, and it's maybe still 50 or 60 degrees in there even when it's cold.
Love it. And then so obviously wood fired. Tell me a little bit about the stove in there, Michael. Is it homegrown or are you rep brand?
Yeah, in fact, I shared some pictures with Risto, and I was looking for one of the stove in this sauna because it's a locally built stove that's probably from the 1930s. It's got a central wood box and then a pretty thick boilerplate. It's taken a lot of really hot saunas over the years, and then a pretty heavy steel framework around that for cradling the rocks. And the heat exchanger is, the 6-inch pipe comes up out of the firebox. It takes this little pass, all 6 inches of the pipe around, and then goes up again. And that piece of pipe can, be red hot on a good sauna night for sure. It's kind of sagged a little bit in that construction over the years, so it's a little finicky to get it started. You really need to heat everything up before it draws well. But after being in a couple of good savusaunas over the years, I realized that having backdraft smoke in the sauna is not a bad thing for for the long-term aesthetics. It's nice to have a little smoky smell in there for sure.
So how does that stovepipe work again? Can you kind of explain that a little bit more? And maybe we'll get a picture and edit it in, but I'm not sure I completely follow. That's kind of a unique setup.
So if you put wood in the front of the wood box, in the back of the wood box, which is a pretty big wood box in this one, the chimney goes out and then it comes back towards the front of the stove, goes over a bit, goes back towards the back of the stove, and then up the chimney. And so it passes through all of the rock bed there. And that's just the mechanism there for a heat exchanger. It's pretty simple. And the thing is that pipe, the times it gets really hot, it started to, it's sort of like the smoke has to go downhill a little bit before it goes up the chimney. And that creates some backdrafting problems. But for now, it works for sure. I've got my methods. I am definitely Saunameister #1 up there. It's it takes just the right. So, but just the right technique to get it going right. But a very big rock bed for the room of its size, and right next to the lake, as you can see there.
But that one was not originally a smoke sauna, was it?
No, but as far as I know, it's always been where it is. Yeah, it's always been just had the sauna stove. However, the logs themselves, you guys probably know of, Arne Aaland, who taught at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and has quite a few books out about Finnish culture and the built landscape and things like that. He's a geographer by trade. And he came up when I was doing the research and looked at all the saunas on this lakeshore there. And he looked at this one in particular. And he figured that actually the logs were part of a homestead, originally part of the farmhouse, and had been repurposed as a sauna because there's some holes bored into certain parts of those logs. And he said, they would have done that where they would have put pegs in to have scaffolding to work up higher floors. So anyway, it was one of those fun sidelines of the book project to get to, rub shoulders with that kind of expertise with Arne, who also wrote a foreword for the book ultimately.
Which is a really good forward.
Yeah.
People will, this was my experience. You crack open the book and the photos are amazing. You get lost in the story of the photos, but you really need to take the time. It's got the forward by Arne, and then or the introduction, and then the forward by David Salmela, and both are really good.
Right.
Don't skip those.
And David, of course, was just the whole book was going towards the David Salmela aesthetic at the end, because he's such a notable architect in the U.S. and particularly in the upper Midwest. And I think in the book, I kind of termed him as the architect of sauna in the U.S. Now, 15 years later and 20 years later, it's, there are a lot of people designing saunas, a lot more, but David had quite a portfolio of projects already at that point. So that was a fun thing to be able to reach for, to have in a final chapter, that these modern saunas with really, not necessarily spare no expense, but, they're on some pretty nice properties, and to have that as a counterpoint to saunas like the one behind me here up in northeastern Minnesota.
Yeah, I recommend people dig into the text. The text of your book, like I said, kind of directed our trail in a few different ways, our exploration. One way was that our family we went up with our kids and we visited David Salmela and got to see like how an architect does things. And we stopped and visited and looked at one of the saunas he designed. And then also in the book, a few other things. You mention a church in Michigan that has a sauna built in the
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
That was super interesting. I corresponded with them a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And then you also mentioned a smoke sauna, and you have pictures of a smoke sauna that was up in it was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Yeah, John Sari's sauna. And that was really kind of the holy grail of the project, was to find the working sauna, a working sauna that was still being used. And I finally tracked down John, who had taught at Northern Michigan University. Or I think was still teaching there then, maybe. So he invited us out, and we didn't have a sauna or light it up there, but he lights that up for special occasions. And over the years, you call the local Finnish American Historical Society up in the Iron Range, or or in the UP somewhere, and people would say, "Oh yeah, the Niemi brothers had one, but it burned down," or the Ahala brothers had one and then it burned down. So they've been around and disappeared. But I don't know now. I haven't followed up on this, but what do you guys know? You would know that there are some operating out there, I would imagine.
I mean, yeah, there's a couple in, again, Minnesota. But as far as outside of the Midwest and Finland, I couldn't name a single one.
I heard of one in Minnesota. Well, our family, we stopped and visited John Sari and saw his, but then I heard of one in Minnesota, and then we had an invite, but things kind of fell through, and so I haven't even seen that one. So that's semi confirmed. And then there's a gentleman out in the Catskills in New York who's built a couple savusaunas, and that's all that I know of.
That's an interesting trip. When I was there in Hancock, I met a lot of people, and almost without exception, all the saunas that I went to were, first of all, what you said about the repurposing of the logs, that used to happen in the old world, and in the new world, they always did that thing. So, you had a good log, you put it in the sauna, you build a house, whatever. But they were all like repurposed. So the saunas used to be saunas, but they were converted, with the smokestack, they were converted to saunas with ovens. As it turns out to be, I have here, you wouldn't be able to read this, but this is Helsinki Sanomat, the biggest newspaper in Finland. And it's like, I know this gentleman here because I met him in Hancock. He was born in the sauna. Robert Knutila is this guy's name. And so I visited, like, I don't know, half a dozen saunas that used to be savusaunas, but not anymore. That's what's happening. But depending on the small particle legislation and whatnot, I'm sure that there's going to be more smoke saunas or savusaunas in the future. And one thing before I let you speak, it was so funny. So I was just in Finland, and I visited the sauna village in Jämsä, which is about 2 or 3 hours north from Helsinki. And it was so funny because this lady who runs the place, she has a PhD. Saya Silen is her name. So she was talking about sauna and like this new stuff. So she says that the sauna culture started like evaporating 130 years ago, because that was the point where people started converting the smoke saunas to the saunas with stoves. But anyway, so in her book, the smoke sauna is the only real sauna there is.
It just reminded me when you mentioned the sauna village, that I would be remiss to not mention about the book, Kalevi Ruska. And, I know you're affiliated with the North American Sauna Society, and Kalevi, I was connected with him during that process. And one nice thing as well about working with the University of Minnesota Press, they gave us a nice advance. So we were able to do this, 2-week kind of sauna exploration trip in Finland as well. And Kalevi opened up a lot of doors for us there. And, we got to to Oliver Aalto's estate there, and really saw some great properties over there. And of course, I mean, we did a relatively short chapter on Finland, and it's all kind of packed in there, but it just seemed to really legitimize, our book there to have that perspective as well.
I'd be interested to hear from you, and then also from Arrow and Sam, do you guys think that North America needs a sauna revival? Is it going to be that beneficial to us? Is it a good enough experience?
I would say, with the trajectory of sauna's popularity, it seems like, especially in the upper Midwest, in areas where there is a lot of enthusiasm, it would seem to be nice to have a couple that are centrally located that, could kind of be used as an artifact, so people get to experience that. I'd never had sauna until I was at the Sauna Society in Helsinki, and they have the one room there, and that was just an extraordinary experience for me. Really, really a nice room, and I've done one more at a different place in Finland, but I by no means have the sort of familiarity with that room that I do with more conventional saunas, and so I think it could be great. I actually had the idea recently. I thought maybe someone could build a trailer sauna, but you have such a big rock mass, it would have to be a very heavy duty trailer, I guess. And the other point there, of course, the time you have to invest into a sauna session is quite a bit. It's wood fired is work enough, I think, for some people. So it doesn't really suit that way, but at least for people to be able to have the experience, I think that would be great.
I would say that the answer is yes and no. It's like, you don't really need the smoke sauna, the sauna per se, but then again, you need it for that full experience, and the full experience part is lacking. And it's like, even how much you try to explain, without people actually experience it, it really is not working. And by the way, before I forget, Kalevi Ruuska is gonna be so happy. I'm gonna force him to watch this episode. I was one of the three founders of the North American Sauna Society, and Kalevi was the one who founded North American Sauna Society back in the day. This is more than 20 years now, but just to point out, like, last Saturday I was in the Joutsa region of Finland, and we were treated to a very classic Finnish style sauna party, which actually started by me and the host. He did all the work. I was just standing next to him, holding my own beer in my hand. So that was my part. But so it's, the whole process was that we heated up the sauna, and then all the folks, there were like maybe 10-15 of us there. We sauna baited like crazy, and then we had a fantastic dinner, and then we partied, not the whole night through, but almost. So this is kind of to people understand what this sauna thing is, and what makes you so happy and why it's so important. Maybe you need just that sauna experience there that drags you away from your gym sauna experience. So it's like, because it's so far out, so special.
I love the sheer authenticity of it, and the kind of basic economy of it all. And it's an agrarian, rural, use what you have type of building. It's built out of native materials on the site you're on, and the fact that you can do that with a dry fit rock stove, and I mean, there's a real simplicity to it. But yeah, a lot of work.
Yeah, in many ways, it's like the opposite of most of the saunas you see these days that have the giant glass windows. You call them the fishbowl saunas, the savusaunas, where, at least my experience in the first one was, I was surprised by how dark it was inside. Even though it had maybe larger windows than some other savusaunas, it was still just incredibly dark in there. And there's something about that environment inside of a dark, it's like a womb in there.
Yeah, you really do reset, those black walls, it's that matte finish. So even when there is a light maybe coming in through a small window or crack or something like that, you're not getting any reflection, so it is going to be such a tamed down experience than our everyday lives with the Ring camera lights and your blue light on your cell phone and the windows in your house. It's good. It's good to detox from that bright light once in a while. I know, my parents always growing up, I'm going to go rest my eyes. I was just code for them. They wanted to take a nap, but I think in today's modern world of a lot of extremes, we're constantly looking at screens and getting blasted with LED lights and things like that. I think it's good to take a break. And what a better place than this dark, warm space, where you can just kind of close your eyes or keep them open and still have a very dark and serene experience.
That's kind of interesting that you would say that, because I started thinking, because the original sauna, the first sauna was a tent, like like the sweat lodges and Europe, the same thing happening. And when people settled down and started farming, the first sauna at that point was a pit sauna, and that I actually tried one for the first time in my lifetime. So no huge windows anywhere, because we are basically underground. So darkness is kind of a thing.
Well, and too, in the winter, it's dark at what, 4 o'clock? So
Correct.
you're not doing a lot of these things in the daylight hours anyway. This may be a end of day ritual where it's probably got a lantern. We've all seen the cottage saunas with the little window where you can hook your little oil lamp or whatever light source you have, and that was all you had.
Yeah. And that was the light source in our sauna. Well, it had an electric light there when I was a little kid, but the window between the rooms there, that's such a nice, simple design there. So, this setting here where our cabin is in northeastern Minnesota was it was a 40-acre plat of land there that was divided up by, I think, 8 families, and 7 of them were Finnish families from South Avenue in Minnesota, in Two Harbors, Minnesota, my hometown, which South Avenue was kind of the Finn town there. And so all of those places, that the other family was Irish and they didn't have a sauna, but the other 7 families all built their own sauna down by the lake there. And those are they're all still standing there. A couple of them are on their last legs, but a couple of them are also nicely kept up. But they're all wood frame buildings. Ours is the only one that's a log building there, and it's a nice. They're all at least 1940s at the latest they were built. So it's a nice little historical preserve.
Very cool.
So I ran across your name when I was exploring sauna in the Matti Kaups archive at the U of M.
Oh yeah.
And so I thank you for your notes. You went through these boxes of information and started cataloging. And so I was able to reference that somewhat. How did you come upon those, and what did you think as you were going through these boxes and boxes of sauna information?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. There's some cool background there. When I was in high school, my mom took some courses at Minnesota Duluth, 30 miles away from Two Harbors. And she had a geography textbook, and she was raving about her geography teacher, Matti Kaups, at Minnesota Duluth. And I loved that geography textbook. I ended up majoring in geography in university, and not originally, but that's kind of what I came to. And I love that perspective and everything. So I knew of him. And then when I was doing my research, he had several academic papers on sauna settlement in the U.S., which notably found, under his methodologies, that the prevalence of sauna on Finnish American farmsteads was actually higher than it was in Finland. It wasn't exactly a cross-country extensive sample, but in the areas that he researched, it was more likely for a farm family to have a sauna in the U.S. And that was just the juice for me when I was researching this, because you just want to find those anecdotes. To me, the central metaphor is this idea of a cultural practice that survives the melting pot. That sauna still is practiced there, and that it's something that people know about, and that families, like people like Aaron Hautala, grew up taking 2 saunas a week, and often with his grandparents. And now I didn't have that particular background, but I did have this building because my grandparents bought this particular cabin from a Finnish American family who were moving down to Lake Worth in Florida and retiring. And so yeah, we got it in the family then. I was about 1 year old at the time, so I've been in that building all my life, or when I'm there.
So you're saying there's a good sauna in Florida now?
I think it was funny. I bet Arrow could tell us a little more about that, but
Awesome. No, awesome, awesome. So, Michael, give me a rundown. I'm sure our listeners are wondering, what is a normal sauna session, for you? Are you, 2, 3 round guy? Are you long breaks? Or do you do the cold plunge with the water? Tell me
Yeah.
about, the average round.
Yeah. And this is, the timing is great today because my wife and I sauna every week here. We live we have a rural property in southwest Wisconsin in what's called the Driftless area. We live in a really beautiful north-south valley with a spring creek running through it and a little trout stream. And it's a great setting for sauna. And I had we bought this farm the year my book came out. And so I was obviously not only bound and determined, but I think also obligated to build a sauna on the farm here. So we got that completed in 2016, I think, finally, and it's been such a great experience to not just sauna, where I would go out to a some friend sauna or at our cabin, which we're up there quite a bit, but to really have a place where you're doing it every week. And that coincided with me getting older and achier and crankier and also having Lyme disease a couple of times. And I just have found that sauna is great that way. So for us, standard, it tends to fall on Sundays a lot. Sunday afternoons works out well for us. It's the creek water is available there, and you can go down in the creek, or we have a little pump that you can fill it. We have a stock tank next to the sauna there, and it's across the creek from the farmstead. So it's kind of technically, I mean, not just technically, it's off grid. So we have no electricity over there. It's obviously wood fired, little water tank on the side, and it certainly is bathing for us every week. So we were over there this afternoon, and I'd say it was a pretty standard session, about 90 minutes for me, probably 5 rounds, something like that, and several dips in the cold plunge. And the cold plunge at its best, I prefer rainwater to creek water, although the creek water is great too. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing like fresh rainwater. And so we often might time the weekly sauna around, if you were thinking about having it Saturday, but then it's going to be a good rainfall on Sunday morning and you can have fresh rainwater there. That's great. And, the building it's a single slope roof, a shed roof, which made it very easy to have a gutter that collects all that rain and dumps in there and fills that up. Pretty hot saunas. I like, it was 190 when I got in there today. But it was once I was surprised walking in today took about 50 minutes. I went to reload and it was 160 already. And, sometimes I kind of snip at 160 today. 160 felt pretty hot over there. It's pretty humid and warm here today. Not terribly warm, but it's funny how those things are, sometimes 160 it feels like you could, whatever, you could take a nap in there. And, but today it felt a little crispy, but by the time I went back over, it was 190. And yeah, a really, really good shot there. Really a lot of fun.
You said that you bathe. Is there a round that you guys soap down? Is it in the hot room? Do you have a shower somewhere?
Yeah, I soak down first right when I go in. And
Okay.
We both work from home, and our kids, our youngest just graduated from high school. So we spend a lot of time on this place, and I'm basically take a shower midweek and take a sauna on the weekends is kind of my weekly bathing ritual. Not to be too familiar with the world, but yeah, and that works out great for me. And yeah, just your basic Dr. Bronner's peppermint soap, and I love having the water heater that's on the side. This is a Castor stove that not a super heavy duty one or anything, but it's served us well. It's been going for about 10 years now, and I don't know how much more I'm going to get out of it. It's starting to burn out a little bit inside, but that's weekly saunas. I mean, we are dedicated weekly sauna people, and I'd say once every 2 months, maybe we have a midweek sauna as well.
Yeah, I can share some photos. I've got those if we want to.
Yeah, Michael, while we get these pulled up, I've got a Castor in mine here at home, and it's been going now about 2-3 years, and yeah, getting good use, and can't complain.
So there's mine there in the middle of that skeleton. So the kind of sharp ends of the roof joist there are the rafters are the water runs towards the back there and is caught.
Yep.
But I think I just included this picture because it kind of shows my impatience. I had the stove in there and really got that building operational before all the skin was on it or anything. I really wanted to have it functional as soon as possible. The creek is right to the right there. Yeah, so this is it, the finished product there. And it kind of, I used a lot of found materials in it. We have a farm here, and then my in-laws had a farm about 15 miles away. And of course, barns are full of old lumber and everything. So I used some of that to some degree. You can see where the water tank is there. And, I love how that you just go over there and that's filled up with the new rainfall. And one thing I want to point out, I don't know if I've seen this anywhere else, but I'm sure, other people have done it. But if you see the wood box there, that's the upper bench, actually. The top of the wood box is the upper bench inside the sauna. And what I like about this design, first of all, our wood sits there outside. You got an ample wood box, and it's south facing, so it fetches the sun there, and it's nice for getting the wood nice and dry. And then, but also on the inside, that space underneath the upper bench is often just kind of wasted space in the sauna anyway. The lower bench is there, and it seems like things kind of fall. It's good place for dust collection and lost dish rags and things. And also, really, in terms of thermal space, that's more space that you have to heat in a way. So I really like how that worked out, and I love how it looks from the outside. Just having that wood. We get wood from our property as well, but the wood we use in the sauna is from a local sawmill, and where they're cutting oak into these squares. So we get this trim waste wood oak, heartwood oak. We have awesome wood, and it's really quite affordable. We get it, I have a big wood trailer that I bring up there, and we just drag that down.
Can't go wrong. No, this looks great. Oh, almost like a little greenhouse effect.
Yeah. So that's that front window there is facing north, and that's just polycarbonate sheets there. Those 4x8 sheets they're translucent. They're not really transparent, so it gives you a little bit of privacy as well. It's a really affordable building material, and I could see maybe in the long run I might finish that more completely, but this isn't an up to code spec building or anything. It's kind of a cabin building. It's it's homemade, designed by me and kind of put together as it went along. And what I really like with that design with the polycarbonate, and that's the same thing up on the top, it really lets a lot of light in. I'm not concerned about it retaining heat as much as, in the winter, it's just really more about getting out of the wind is the more important part. I was saying how we got this building going as soon as possible, like getting the stove hooked up and getting the inner paneling in before I insulated or anything and made it operational. It went through a good part of one winter in there, and it still worked pretty well that way. And the part that we're looking at here with the polycarbonate panels and the sliding door and everything, that was just open. And, we didn't enclose that for probably the first couple of years. So we just had this outdoor porch. And, you got to be a little hardier for that, but it was still a really good experience. And now I really love it the way it is. We've got a string of solar lights there up on the top, and they light the outside, and then they light through those windows also into the dressing room there. And then you can kind of see through that one opening to the sauna door itself. And the one other thing I'll say about the design on this, so it's built on a skid foundation, meaning it's not attached to the ground. And several times in the research in the book, I came across situations where people kind of can skirt the local setback rules by, in various ways disguising us. Like one I know of is a sauna that looks like an ice house, and it just, and they can have it closer to the lake that way. But, buildings that are movable are not regulated in the same ways as buildings that are fixed. And so anyway, so this is on a skid foundation. And then when we bought this property, there was an old redwood pool deck for an above ground pool. And we didn't have any interest in having one of those, but I repurposed the redwood for the floor inside the sauna. And instead of having a drain, it's just all gapped and then screened on the bottom. And I know, and I've told this to a lot of people over the years, and they feel like, oh, that just can't work. It'll be too drafty in there. But it's never been. I mean, if it's really, really cold and really windy, it definitely sets you back a little bit, not from having a sauna, but has, it's not maybe quite as hot as you would like, but it drains real nice. And also you just get really great air exchange that way. So it's worked out great. And it makes that bottom floor for little kids who want to go down there or anything much milder.
No, that's awesome. I mean, if you're going to do something off the grid and you're working with the budget and you've got some recycled, materials around, I think you can't do much better than this. This looks cool.
It's a beautiful sauna.
It truly.
I'm really happy with the way it came out. Yeah. Sorry, Errol. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that well, like I already said, it's a beautiful sauna, and also kind of how you did the drain is exactly how they used to do the drains, overseas
Yeah.
back in Finland. So, and it's just like, that's there's a Risto always says that some, I can't remember who it was who said that he wants his saunas drafty. And this is something that people just, when we say it probably almost on every episode that we do, but people don't get that, and the kind of the airflow thing, and that's, by the way, that's also one thing that what the smoke saunas are so good for, because you never ever have that lightheaded feeling because there's so much air all the time inside the sauna.
Yeah, for sure. I remember seeing that in this book, seeing a gap floor like that. This is Finnish Sauna Design and Construction from Rakennustieto.
Rakennustieto, yeah, I know. I have that book somewhere.
It's fun to pay attention to those little details in the pictures and say, oh, I can do that too now. I see that.
So, Michael, I have a question for you. It's and also I bring this up a lot as well. But so one of the first episodes we ever did was the episode of what's happening in the state of Maine. And I've been trying to wrap my head around the thing that, like, what you are representing, this rich cultural sauna that has been going on in the U.S. for a very, very long time. But what's kind of happening now is you don't have that 2-room structure. You have only the hot box, and then you put it somewhere. It's just sometimes you put it in your basement, sometimes you put it in your backyard. One of the last questions that I posed when we did that main episode, this gentleman who didn't have any background with Finland, none whatsoever, but he made me laugh so hard because I asked him that same question, like, so how are we like here now when we used to be like back there, like in the real sauna? And his answer was basically like a Finnish person would have answered it. It was like, well, I have this great sauna, and I don't give a hoot what other people are, because I have my good sauna, I'm enjoying it, so I don't care what other people do. So it's like, don't bother with what's going on in the world, because I love my own sauna. So how do you feel? How do you feel?
I like to avoid the dogma, honestly, because it's like, do what feels good, and if you have the opportunity. I mean, my wife and I are very fortunate to have a sauna on our property, a wood-fired sauna that we can use. But we know what good sauna is to us and what fits our practices. And there's a lot of formality and a lot of rules out there. And a lot of them make good sense, like the rule, the law of Lulu. And I'm adamant about making sure you're not wasting space up high in the room. I mean, what's the point of having 3 feet of empty space above your head? Obviously, that's where the money is, baby. That's where you want to at least be able to, have your head up there. A few pointers I've picked up over the years, and I learned this in Finland at the Sauna the Sauna Society in Helsinki, this, custom of really like letting the guest, the person who's not too experienced, control the dipper and the flow of water and things like that. And, if they're feeling a little timid and things like that, and not trying to force people into an experience that's a little too intense for them early on. That goes a long way, I think, towards getting people comfortable with the practice, for sure.
Agreed. Now, Michael, have you been to any of those Aufguss? Have you done any of the performative sauna, immersive experiences that are out there?
No, I haven't done Aufguss, and and I'm, familiar with the practice, especially from that great episode in The Perfect Sweat in Mikkel Aaland's series. And I really, 99% of my saunas are either in the sauna behind me here or the one we just showed that's at the farm. I mean, that's the by far the great part of my experience. And I would love to try Afgos at some point. I was just in Norway for a couple of weeks in May and had the opportunity to go to Oslo Badstue Forening, downtown Oslo, right on the waterfront there. And in fact, I reached out to them several months before and said, I'm Michael Nordskog. I wrote this book. Maybe you're familiar with it. And I made sure to say Mikkel Aaland wrote the blurb on the back of my book, just because everyone in Norway knows Mikkel in the sauna community for sure. And I said, are you interested in me doing a book presentation there? And they said, oh yeah, that sounds great. That would be a lot of fun. And I'd already talked to Mikkel, and he invited my daughter and I to come stay with him. And then I said, would you be interested in coming up and doing this with us as with me as well? Let's do a Q&A, and you can be the Q and I'll do the A. And I wasn't sure what they had in mind for that. But anyway, it turned out they wanted us to do it right in the sauna, in a fully heated sauna. Now, I got to say, from practice, I like to work my way in slowly to high heat. And usually for the first round, if I talk too much, I get gassed. I just find I don't have the stamina to do it. And then maybe after a couple rounds outside, it's very different. So I was a little bit worried about that. And I'd already been to the facilities there a couple days before, went down at 7 a.m. and had a sauna and took a few plunges into Oslo Fjord. And they run their saunas hot there. I mean, it was like, it's the real deal. And it's such a nice scene. Anyway, Mikkel agreed to do that. We had a great stay at his place, and I got to enjoy his sauna. And then we went up and did that, and it was so much fun. It was a nice little private session, which they sold out immediately when they put it out for reserving. And yet the picture there is the group of folks who were there that day, and we just had a lot of fun talking about, Norway it's sort of a renaissance of sauna, badstue there. Traditions that 500 years ago would have been much more common and endured with our Finnish friends to the east. It's just remarkable to see the culture there on the waterfront and the way it's kind of intertwined with the tourist traffic and the business traffic there. And we had a great time there that afternoon. And then I was there for a couple more days and learned early in the morning on our departure day that our flight was going to be a couple hours late. And I was like, yeah, now I can go to this other Sukkerbieten is another Oslo Badstue Forening location right down on the waterfront there. And that time I was really able to just take great rounds and relax and meet a bunch of people and really get to enjoy the social aspect of sauna, which, I love my wife. We have great saunas together. I really enjoy that. It doesn't count social to be with your spouse. I think it's just, that's very domestic. But Mikko mentions the physical, the spiritual, and the social pillars of sauna. And that kind of resonated with me in Oslo. Anyway, Sam, a long story back to your Afgos questionnaire, because I still have this in mind. But we were joking at that session that we were doing literary Afgos.
Waving the book around, hitting people with
that's exactly. And never has sweating bullets in front of a audience that you're speaking to felt more appropriate.
Yeah. So much for your fear of public speaking. Let's do it. Let's half naked in 200 degrees.
Yes, very fun. And we took regular breaks and went into the fjord. I think we did 4 breaks. We had about an hour and 15 minutes, just really fun, engaged questions. And I speak enough Swedish to, at least address a few things here and there. And of course, we did most of the presentation in English, but it was a lot of fun for me. I had gone to graduate school in Stockholm back in the 1980s and been to Scandinavian countries, several times over the years. But anyway, this was a really, really fun trip. And in fact, if I can indulge a little bit on the rest of the trip, I had one of my kids with me and we went and visited the Nordskog farm on the West Coast near Haugesund, and got to climb Nordskog Mountain and the whole thing there. So really got to touch the soil there in a really good way. And by the way, everywhere in Norway there are saunas on the waterfront, commercial saunas. It's uh, it's just outstanding. We stayed at an Airbnb one night, and a friend of the woman who owned the Airbnb was staying with her, and she owns like 13 different saunas in the Stavanger area. And she gave me I have a new hat. I better grab it here and try it on.
Is that relatively new for them?
Well, in that, it's the last 10 years, I think, basically. She gave me this that her mother had made. I was just one of those wonderful connections, when things
Cool.
come together. So yeah, it's just all over the place there, and a lot of sauna manufacturing. I think people don't have as many, private home saunas, I think, but the commercial business there is definitely there.
Because I know like it existed in their history, and in Minnesota we have tons of Norwegians.
Yeah.
There's even a Norwegian Heritage Center south of where we live in where's it, Spring Grove, Minnesota. And
Yeah.
and I've asked them before, and I haven't heard any positive responses, but I've asked them, did any of the Norwegian immigrants come over and build their own badstue, their own sauna? And
Yeah.
I haven't been able to find one yet.
Well, and the answer is really no, because that tradition had largely disappeared from the places in Norway where it still survived. Now, if you go to like, the areas on the Finnish or on the Swedish Norwegian border, there's an area called the Finnskog there. And I've actually found out I have a tiny bit of Finnish ancestry from that area. One of my great grandparents was from that area. And so there was, there's more of a sauna tradition there, but it's really kind of a renaissance. And by the time Norwegians started leaving for the US in the 200 years ago and 150 years ago, people there, at least in the coastal areas of Norway, I think it would have been very, very rare to find one. But you see it in the historical literature, and it's certainly in the culture. I think this is in my book, maybe you can tell me, Risto, but a little anecdote in there about like the Greenland settlement, on there's a sauna like structure there with the scorched rocks and everything. The Vikings living on the west coast of Norway had a sauna. That it was in the culture everywhere in northern places. And of course, why wouldn't it be? I mean, in a pre-industrial society, it would be such an important part of health and hygiene and good life.
So, Michael, we've been talking about the history of sauna a lot here, this evening. I'm going to flip the other side of that coin. Where do you see sauna going? What are some of the next steps here? I mean, we've seen plenty of gadgets and gizmos. They get advertised to us all online and things like that. The true traditional Finnish sauna, Scandinavian sauna, if you will. There's all over. Where do you see that going here in the U.S.?
Yeah, clearly the one big area of development is these public sauna spaces that there are, there's a dozen residual ones around the upper Midwest, but now the obvious example is Cedar and Stone in Duluth with Justin and his team there. I mean, it's just fantastic. The product they put out there, and also their particular site on the waterfront in Duluth, and then their entrepreneurship program there, and they're really bringing people in to the industry to do this hospitality sauna where people can go and use a sauna for 90 minutes, and do that. That could be your weekly gig for sure. I mean, I think that's where it's at, and it's remained having the private sauna. I mean, that's booming too. The Glen Auerbach side of things, the DIY side of things it's obviously booming, and especially during COVID, it just kind of went through the roof. So I don't think sauna is going anywhere. I don't think it's a fad by any means. and people are investing too much. But I think, to me, the most satisfying thing is to see that public sauna is reestablished. I mean, in a lot of places where it just didn't really exist anymore. I was just reminded of this. I can't remember why the other day, but when we did our research trip in Finland, the Kotiharjun, the one in the Kallio neighborhood, I think at the time it was the only wood-fired public sauna in Helsinki, and this was in 2008. And I think there were only a few really, there weren't a lot of public saunas at that point, because, of course, every apartment block in Helsinki, every private home had a sauna, and so that place is great because the facade is just so beautiful, and it's a great commercial edifice, and it's very, very photogenic. And it was a great thing to get in the book, but also it was just such a authentic long-term place that had been there. Well, and obviously now the same thing's true in Helsinki. Public sauna in places where young people can gather and have a few beers and works out into that. I mean, what a great development. It's so fun to see. I'm really, really excited about that. And really, for me, going to Oslo was kind of the first real experience of that. It was very, very, very satisfying.
That's absolutely true what you said. So it's that there was no public saunas, basically disappeared, but there, because everyone had their own home saunas, so it's like the whole scene diverted in that regard. But obviously now it's like everywhere else, it's there's a lot of new saunas, not a lot of new public saunas popping everywhere, coming out everywhere. So that it really is happening right now. And what's kind of, I believe that kind of what maybe Sam partially was asking about is like, what is the direction? Where shall it, because there's so much, we have this ambassador program that we are working on, because people are still confused, what the sauna actually is. And kind of the first step that we've been taking for a very long time is the criteria, because you want to tell people like what they will be seeing, what they will be experiencing when they go to a place, whether it's an aufguss scene, it's like a pre-programmed process that you go through, or if it's something that like people like old schoolers like I do, is like, I don't want to be told when to do what. So I want to control the steam if that's doable. I don't want anybody else to control it. It's want to be me or somebody I can trust to do that for me.
But no, on that note, Michael, it has been an absolute pleasure. I wish we had more time, and I definitely want to reschedule a follow-up. We definitely need a part 2, because I think we've just recorded the intro to our episode with with you. So I'd love to get more time where we can really go in depth on just your process on what got you going with sauna, and more so because I think there's a lot of good information that your book shares with the world that might not be written in there. Like you said, it's a picture book, but there's so much great text, there's so much great history and story and culture there. But again, those pictures are, they're going to be worth 1,000 words. And hopefully we can pry a few of those out of Michael here in this next round.
Yeah, well, maybe we can share a few of the historical pictures as well, and do that. That's another aspect of things, and something that was really fun. Well, I was a little intimidated by the idea of being grilled by the three of you simultaneously, but I felt right at home here. So, and I really appreciate the work you guys do on this, and elevating the dialogue, and it's just really, really fun to see. Like I say, I mean, it would be very easy for me as an author to somehow try to take credit for what's happened in the last 15 years, but it's just circumstance, and we were really lucky when we created the book to kind of be at a moment where people were ready for a book like that about the Upper Midwest. And so I'm glad to hear that it's landed with you guys.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, and I would encourage all of our listeners to go out, pick up a copy of the book. It captures what I love so much about sauna. There's all kinds of different expressions of sauna. We've mentioned aufguss, there's There's the health and biohacking community. There's all kinds of different little pieces of the pie, but this piece, the Finnish American piece and the Northwoods expression of sauna, I've fallen in love with that, and it's perfectly captured in the book. If I was ever to write a book, it would probably just pretty much be the same book. So it's already done. Go buy a copy and make sure that you read the text of the book.
100%. You can get lost, people, in the pictures, because that's how I did. I all of a sudden you're like, ooh, there's another cool one. There's another cool one. Oh shoot, I'm 3 pages behind. I didn't get caught up. Now I'm all lost, and then I start over. But it's a cool read. And it is a great conversation starter. And like Michael said, if you've got a sauna lover in your life and you don't know what to get them and they don't have a copy of this book, go get it. They will love it. You will win that holiday gift giving event. Trust me, they're going to love it. We'll make sure there's a link down below when we do get this posted on all of our social medias. Again, I'm sure, Michael, you've got reviews out there. You're getting, I'm sure you can pick this up on Amazon. Is there anywhere else that you can pick this thing up at?
I always love to recommend Bookshop. That's a site where you can purchase it and dedicate your purchase to your local independent bookstore. That's a great way to buy the book. And also the University of Minnesota Press, directly through them. They're just celebrating their 100th anniversary here this year. And I just am so impressed year after year with the titles they come out with. And they're very dedicated to Scandinavian American stuff in the upper Midwest. And I was, so lucky that they wanted to take on this title, and that's worked out well. And by the way, one thing they did is make a really handsome volume out of it. It's still, the second printing is still a hardcover, printed in Italy with this beautiful linen cover underneath the dust jacket. And yeah, I'm very, very happy with it. So glad to hear you guys like it.
Love it.
It's been a pleasure, truly, and it's exciting. And I obviously heard we were up and running, and then we were talking to Kalevi back in the day, so I knew about your book from day one, and I'm very sorry that it took me 15 years to finally get to meet you virtually. But anyway, so thank you so much. I'm sure that we're going to be in touch sooner than later, I hope.
Absolutely, everybody. We will come out. There will be a volume 2 on this one. We're gonna keep talking to Michael. He's gonna stay connected with the Upper Bench. If you want to get a hold of him, or if you've got questions for him, feel free, get a hold of us. We'll make sure that maybe the next one we've got a few of your Q&As that we can tackle. But again, make sure you're following, liking all of our stuff. The algorithms, the more you like sauna stuff, the more cool sauna content you're going to get served up. So go out there and find it. And hopefully we'll have more for you coming up. But thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure.